So we're gonna. All right. We're gonna start. I won't do a poll. I'm gonna invite you all though to type in the chat. What I'm particularly interested in is where you're coming from in the are affected by the situation in the West. So how many of you live in any of the affected states, which start pretty much Colorado off to the Pacific. If you're in New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, certainly Nevada, Idaho, Utah, boy, that's pretty much the West. If you're not, that's okay. You're still more than welcome. I assure you there's water problems where you are too. But anyway, just curious. If you're having trouble hearing me, is anyone up? Mark, how is my audio coming through? Is it okay?
You're getting a little choppy here and there.
Okay, I'm going to turn off my video with apologies. I have mediocre internet because I live so close to the Atlanta airport. Anyway, if you live anywhere in the West, you are affected by climate change. But if you live in the East, you're also being affected in other ways. So we will talk about some of those as well tonight. So, okay, so Southern California, who else is living in areas? So Arizona, Clinton says, and Stephanie, you're in Arizona also. Okay, you maybe heard of CAP. Have Stephanie or Clinton, have you heard of CAP water? That's the Central Arizona Project. Maybe you've even seen it on your drives, seen this kind of straitjacketed canal of water flowing through the desert, evaporating as it goes. That's carrying water from the Colorado River down to Tucson, to Phoenix, across the state. I'm in Georgia too, Robert, and we've seen some pretty bad droughts. We had our own water war with over Lake Lanier with Alabama and Florida, and pretty much we've won the last version of the war, but that means that the Apalachicola Bay, the oysters in the bay are in jeopardy because the water is getting extra salty in that bay because it's not getting enough water flowing in because we're using so much of the water for drinking and such here and agriculture here in Georgia. So yes, there's actually water rights issues here in the East as well. But we're going to concentrate today on the West. And I want to get started by just sharing for only a couple of minutes. Yeah, the groundwater recharge fields are really cool, Mark. And in fact, the idea is that the water coming from the Colorado River isn't the cleanest. So it's actually dumped in the ground to recharge the aquifers and then tapped, the groundwater is tapped for use. Kind of wild idea. Dump the water in the ground and then pull it back out again with a pump. But then the water is much cleaner, is much better shape. That naturally filters it. So anyway, we're going to talk about climate change today and what's called a megadrought. Have any of you have ever heard the term megadrought? If not, you're going to see it in a couple of videos that we're going to watch in just a few minutes. Megadrought is a drought that lasts, I don't know what the official definition is, but our current megadrought in the West has been running for 23 years. 23 years. And no worries, Whitney, glad you could join us. So that long, water in the West has been a problem. Rainfall has been very low in the West. You're going to see some stunning images in about 2 minutes when we get started. So the ultimate culprit is climate. Well, there's two culprits. You're going to learn about one in the video. And that is that when a lot of the water in the West is the Colorado River. And when the Colorado River was first allocated, split up among all the states, they divided it based upon the data they had up to that point. And for the whole decade before they divided up the water, it had been raining extra heavily. So they divided up more water than was normally in the river. Even before climate change, the river is what we call over allocated, which means there's more water going out of the river than coming into it, which is a big problem under normal conditions. But then we add in climate change. And one big thing that climate change is doing is making intense weather events more intense. And if you think about it for a moment, when you have a system and you add more energy into the system, what happens? Well, many of you have children, okay? Let's say let's use Halloween. The kids go out for Halloween night and they bring back candy, right? And they eat a lot of that sugar. Hopefully they don't. But imagine that for a moment that they do, right? They're bouncing all over the house, right? It's just chaotic, right? They've added energy to their system in the form of the sugar, and now they're just going crazy, right? That is more or less, I just thought of that right now, but that is actually not a bad analogy for what's happening with our climate, right? We are getting more energy coming in because these gases, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and there's a couple of others, CFCs, water vapor, are absorbing a lot of the heat that the Earth would radiate back into space, because the Earth absorbs sunlight that comes in from the sun and then radiates it back. And if you don't know what that's like, just walk over asphalt on after it was a hot day in the evening, you walk over the parking lot and you can feel the heat radiating up. That's that heat radiating back into space. And you have a lot of that being trapped by this blanket. And the more of these gases we put in the air by burning fossil fuels and keeping cows and rice and things like that, and nitrous oxide comes from fertilizer, the more heat's getting trapped. The more heat's getting trapped, the more heat's in the system. The more heat's in the system, the more energetic the system gets, the more unstable our climate gets. So we talk about climate change, we talk about global warming. I'm going to give you a new term today, climate destabilization, because that is what's going on. Our climate is going haywire, just like your kids after Halloween. It's going haywire, right? So we got to get that sugar out of the kids. We got to stop giving them sugar. We got to stop putting these greenhouse gases into the air that's adding the energy. So that is my 5-minute, really bizarre explanation for why the topic we're going to talk about today and look at in these videos is happening to begin with. Are there any questions before we dive into the first video? This is just kind of, again, setting the stage for what we're going to look at now, considering climate in the West. But is there any questions about what I described? Thank you, Anthony. I literally thought of that right now. Those of you that are in my Honors 480 Creativity and Innovation class, that was pretty wild. That just literally popped into my head while I was talking today. I'm pretty impressed with that one. It really does help. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to have to hold on to that one. Okay. Well, we're going to watch our first video now. And this first one's about, I want to say something like 12 to 14 minutes. Actually, it's 13 minutes and 42 seconds. The second video we're going to watch is about 8 minutes. So together, we're going to watch about 21 minutes tonight. In between them, we'll talk a bit. The first video is more about the drought in the West and in general terms. And the second one is a little bit more about the Colorado River, although both will talk about the Colorado River. Because the Colorado River is, if you haven't heard the cliche yet, it is the lifeblood of the West. So it is so essential to the West that we need that. Okay. I know Mark needs the link. I haven't put it in the chat box yet. I'm going to go ahead and add the link. You have a couple different choices before we start. Recommended is for you to go ahead and click on that link and view it yourself, and you can come back, or you can watch the link. Mark is going to be so kind as to run it from his superior internet. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pause recording while we watch the video, so we don't have any copyright issues with our recording. So if there aren't any questions, we're going to go ahead and dive into this really good 60 minutes episode on water in the West. All right, let's get started. I'm going to mute my audio.
Clifford, slight issue. I followed the link and I see the video and it says that I need to log into Paramount Network to watch it. This is the Colorado River Basin Plans for a Drier Future. Sorry, you're still muted, Clifford.
Just a minute, I'm looking at that. It looks like we're probably going to have to watch the other one first. And I had a third one. I will have to locate that as backup. They literally, you know what happened? It was probably available for a week right after it aired. Or two.
Yeah.
And it literally just in the last 3 days became no longer available. So we're going to watch the second one first, and I will pull up another one. So bear with me a moment while I get that second one. Wow, that was quick. Let's hope the second one's okay.
Yeah, I'll see if it could be like on YouTube as well.
Well, we'll go ahead and watch this other one first. So hopefully that one is okay. And I will worry. I have 8 minutes to figure something out. So don't worry.
Okay. All right, this one is working, and I'm gonna
Great.
now
Go ahead and watch that first. And that's a shame. That 60 minutes one is exceptional. But this one has some pretty powerful minutes in it too. So
share screen, share sound, sharing.
California started restricting water.
I'll have to just listen to me. All right. So first of all, I just love your quick reactions. Maybe many of you were fully aware of this issue before, and there's nothing new in what you just saw. Maybe this is a complete shock. I love the phrase "slow-moving train wreck" for describing what's going on, because it really captures this strange fact that there's really not a lot of panic. There's really not a lot of concern. I have visited St. George, Utah many times. St. George is booming. It is one of the fastest growing places in the country. And it's booming without a clear sense of where the water is going to come from. And basically, it's going to come from the Colorado River, but there isn't any more for the Colorado to give. So what's going to happen? I'd love to see your thoughts. Feel free to type in the chat or go ahead and unmute and share your thoughts on this, your reaction to this problem.
Hey everyone, it's Anthony. I think one of the major problems is indifference at this point. I think it's almost ignorance as well, where we're kind of just been living life with water being available as a resource that's commonly available through water bottles, water fountains, washing our cars or dishes. So it's hard to hear and listen to, and then kind of take seriously without more knowledge, or I guess spreading the knowledge that there is a severe issue going on.
Great point. Great point. I'm reminded of another water crisis. Oh, we've got plenty of them. This is the Ogallala Aquifer, which underlies much of America's grazing lands, the Great Plains. A large part of the Great Plains is underlain by an aquifer that is being drained far more rapidly than it's being recharged. It's actually fossil water, which means it's very old water. It's been there a long time. And from a time when the plains was a lot wetter, during the last ice age and even further back. So that water is being tapped out and the ground's actually sinking, just like it is in California. As the aquifers are drained, the ground literally sinks. And there's this general sense of, well, we're never going to run out, or if we do, they'll pipe in water from somewhere else. Like, where? Literally these crazy ideas to pipe water from the Mississippi River across the Great Plains, or bring in water to the west from the Pacific Northwest or something, with these incredibly long pipes that no one's even thought about building yet. There's just this naive notion that there'll always be water. Something will be done. And in fact, it's so bad that in the Midwest, in the Ogallala Aquifer, a lot their policies are that if you're a farmer and you're allocated Ogallala water to use, if you do not use it, you lose it. Literally, you are compelled to use water whether you want to or not. The policies are absolutely crazy. So some great comments coming in chat. There are no solutions. So Stephanie says just bringing awareness to the problem. Kaylee says she lives in military housing and all around is mostly desert-like. Those of you that have been to Phoenix, have you ever stood in a lawn in Phoenix and then you drive out to the edge of town and it's this stark desert with almost nothing growing? It's otherworldly. You drive into Phoenix and there are waterfalls, or you drive into Las Vegas and there's all this water everywhere. And then you go out into the countryside and there's nothing. So the housing had lush green grass with frequent waterings. Seems like a lot of indifference. Well, the grass around us, it's hard to understand where there's actually a crisis. If you are in Arizona, go down to Tucson And you're going to see a lot of what's called xeriscaping, Xeriscaping. Xeriscaping is landscaping with arid, wet conditioned plants, ideally native plants. And when you do that, you don't have to water your lawn. You don't have to water your ground because whatever's growing there is what grows naturally there, which is great for wildlife, by the way. It's awesome for wildlife. And in Tucson, that's a big deal. Most homes use xeriscaping. Up in Phoenix, it's like everybody's trying to live in the Northeast. It's crazy. People have trees in their lawns that have no business growing in that part of the country at all. And they're dependent upon constant water. So it sounds like those are affected in the areas aware of the issue. Mark says, yes, in fact, the real big kicker we'll get to in just a minute, and that's agriculture. So Whitney says, I've heard a little bit about the situation. It's not surprising. Surprising people aren't taking it more seriously. The lack of solutions is alarming. I agree. Rebecca just comes around and says, piping water is an asinine idea. That pretty much captures it. Corey says it's mind-blowing to see how it's changed. I have pictures of my first visit to the Hoover Dam in 2008 compared to last year. Wow. I saw that Las Vegas, Fallon says, recently put restrictions on how big pools can be. Seems like too little, too late. Well, what's really crazy is most of the water isn't going to people's homes. So yes, do people need to conserve water? Yes. Should we talk about limiting population growth in Las Vegas and St. George and Phoenix? Yes. Is that the root of the problem? No. Agriculture is by far the root of the problem, and particularly agriculture in California. Also agriculture in Colorado. Did any of you know that there are these tunnels that carry water from the western slopes of Colorado to Denver? Anybody live in Denver or Front Range? You're probably drinking water that originated flowing west, right? And it was diverted in these giant diversion tunnels to flow east. So Denver is also using Colorado River water. And meanwhile, if you're a fish in the Colorado River, you really need the water, right? So there's also the question of should wildlife have an opportunity? So there's ag, there's wildlife, there's who else needs water? Recreational boaters, fishing. We're talking about a huge recreational boating industry on these lakes. There's industry. There's power generation. Cool water is such a powerful means of cooling. It has a very high heat capacity, right? Which means it can absorb heat really well, absorb a lot of it, right? So it absorbs that heat, and then you can cool your nuclear power plant, right? That's really important to be able to cool your nuclear power plant. So what about ag, and how do we deal with that? How do we deal with the fact that agriculture is using something like, I'm going to throw 70% out, but something like 70% of the water in the West is going into agriculture, and a huge percentage of agriculture of our food supply is coming out of California. Huge amount of our produce, a lot of our fruits and vegetables are coming out of California. So what do we do? And how do we balance that? And what do we do for farms? And then there's issues like, well, farms should grow more salt, dry tolerant crops. Well, what do you tell the almond grower who's planted his trees, took 15 years, 10 years to be able to get a decent harvest, and now can no longer water the trees and they're all going to die, right? But they need a lot of water. It takes a huge amount of water to produce an almond. It's something like 1 gallon of water for every almond or something like that. It's crazy. So Clinton says more controlled drip systems, water reclaiming closed systems, and supplementing soil with water absorbent materials. Yes, there's a lot of things that can be done. Are they all being done? Desalinating the ocean water. Absolutely, desalinization is possible. Whitney, I'm going to talk about some of the minuses. One is it produces a lot of waste. And you say, wait a minute, all I'm doing is taking water and taking the salt out. Exactly. What do you do with all that salty sludge that's left over after you desalinate? What about the energy it takes? It takes an immense amount of energy right now. Now, hopefully that will change. Chris says we've begun to target the agricultural industry as it represents one of the biggest consumptions of water in the world. It's important to begin to look for creative and innovative solutions for more sustainable and efficient farming. One problem we have, by the way, is as we use a huge amount of water, particularly as we use groundwater, right? We can end up with groundwater becoming saline or salty. This is called soil salinization, and it's also happening in the West. It happens also near the coast as sea level rises and you get this insurgence of salt water moving inland. And then that can kill a lot of plants too. So that's another threat to agriculture associated with water availability. So wind power, Lovely, tell me more. What are we gonna do? We can certainly put up windmills, and we can use that to pump water. Oh, for desalinization, yes. It would take a lot of wind power, a lot of energy to do that. And obviously it's only viable along the coast. And then you have to do something with that salty water, which will kill, it's so hypersaline, it's gonna kill a lot of life. So where do you put it? GMO, modifying crops, Corey says. That's not a bad idea. That's another solution. How about looking into halophytes? Anybody familiar with that term? Halophytes. The other term, I'll tell you the two here. You're going to have some great terms for Scrabble by the end of the evening here. Glycophytes and halophytes. Anybody? Sounds like two alien races on Star Trek, doesn't it? The glycophytes are plants that are not salt tolerant. If you dump a lot of salt water on a glycophyte, it dies. Soybeans, glycophytes. Most every plant out there, glycophytes. Halophytes are salt tolerant. You put salty water on them, they're fine. Obviously, mostly those are things that grow in the tidal flats, and we don't really think of eating them usually. So, but beginning to find plants that are more salt tolerant would be a great thing too. So if only making water wasn't so dangerous. Well, Robert, when I was growing up, people had these ideas of towing icebergs, right? Towing icebergs down to desert climates to provide water with them, because the iceberg is actually all fresh water. When the ocean freezes, it excludes the salt. So we actually end up with fresh water. Of course, that's not helping us much with climate change, is it? With all the ice that's currently melting. But we're getting calving glaciers in the green Greenland and such, so who knows? Not so much calving ice, a little bit off of Alaska, so not quite as convenient. But, so more ideas popping in here. Loveline says, making the heat wave go a different direction. Yeah, well, unfortunately, heat moves from areas, well, in fact, the big reason we have weather, by the way, is because we've got a temperature differential between the equator and the poles, right? Sunlight hitting the poles is a lot less than hitting the equator. So it's a lot warmer in the equator. So you got a heat engine where it's just transferring heat from the equator, from the poles to the equator to the poles, excuse me. So this is why hurricanes in the Northern Hemisphere move north, right? They might move east-west, but you're not going to see it move south, right? Because it's moving in the cooler water. It's transferring heat energy from warmer to cooler conditions. So anyway, very difficult to steer weather systems. It's going to be a problem. Look to bring government intervention to impose stricter. Yes, there's only so much government can do though, because then Big Ag steps in, and Big Ag has a very good lobby. If you're not familiar with Big Ag's lobby, it's big. And we're talking Big Ag, we're talking about the corn and cattle as well. We're talking about industrial agriculture. They have a lot of power in government, and that's going to be hard to get the regulations. They're going to say, wait a minute, and what's going to happen to consumer costs? They're going to go through the roof, right? So that's the other problem here as we think about regulating. It's going to come back and bite us, basically, with whatever we do. So anyway, I'm skipping a little bit here. Impossible Foods, Impossible Burger, Mark says, requires a quarter of the water used to produce the same burger from a cow. So yes, we're continuing to look at ways, if you want to have a huge carbon footprint, if you want to have a huge ecological footprint, if you want to have a huge water footprint, eat a lot of beef. Huge, eat a lot of veal and beef and all that. And sheep, I believe, as well, is quite high. Absolutely huge. So ways, if we move to a more plant-based diet, that's going to help globally with water use. Air conditioning, Loveline, you hit upon another problem. The warmer it gets in the West, the more people need air conditioning, right? So what do we do about that? Because the more air conditioning, the more energy use, the more fossil fuels. Vicious So Robert says, trying to make rain clouds seeding clouds. That's, that's been around for a long time and hasn't gone too far, unfortunately. But it's still a limited possibility in limited places. But snowfall, take the snow and transport it. It takes a lot of energy to transport water, doesn't it? So you're going to talk about transporting it up over the Appalachians or down the Appalachians and thousands of miles. And while you transport it, if it's open, it's going to evaporate, right? So you're going to be losing it. And it's got to go across the Great Plains, which really need it too, right? So that's the these are the challenges. Ultimately, I do think that we're going to be probably doing a lot of piping of water. I honestly do. I really don't see the East. The problem has been flooding, and I think we're probably going to see more of that as we go. So how do we manage it? I love these ideas rolling in. This is really cool. I see 9 new messages. I'm scrolling and there's just more great ideas coming out there. And this is awesome. Absorbing the heat with solar panels. Not quite sure how that would work. You can produce electricity with solar panels, and then you can obviously make a big air conditioning unit. What's really absorbing the heat is a gas like CFCs or now HCFCs. They're also really good greenhouse gases. I gotta laugh at this one. Air conditioners are great because they absorb heat. How do they absorb heat? By using gases that absorb heat, right? Refrigerators work the same way. What happens when you have an old refrigerator, an old gas, or an old air conditioner? If that unit leaks, that goes into the air, and you've just added a huge dose of greenhouse gas to the air. Oh boy! And here's a project in Phoenix: cool pavement. Yeah, there's a lot we can do with green roofs, Stephanie, and a lot we can do with permeable pavement, where we're not letting the water run off, which can be a big problem in heavy, because these same areas that are prone to drought are also prone to flooding. Did you know that if you're in the desert Southwest, one of the main causes of death in like desert national parks is drowning? Can you imagine that? Because of flash floods. Because when you have a drought for a long period of time, the ground actually becomes hydrophobic and it repels water. And when you do have rain, that water quickly runs off into arroyos, into gullies, into rivers, and flows across the land into these gulches. And you end up with just incredible amount of flooding problems from that. So permeable ways we can handle flow and also potentially keep the temperature down. Anthony asked, are there any organizations or programs advocating water reservation? You mean like water? Well, one idea Mark already talked about, we talked a little bit about, is this idea of taking water and dumping it back in the ground and storing it, banking it, okay? Banking water. It's actually such a thing where you're storing water. And in fact, there's kind of a neat low-tech example of this in Africa, in parts of Africa like Kenya, where in villages, people are being taught there's an organization, it does have a religious affiliation, I have to go look it up, to build, you can just Google the term, it's called a sand dam, sand dams. And sand dams are basically in channels, streams that are normally dry. You basically mound up the sand, and when it does rain, water comes, flows in, and the sand collects that water and stores it, banks it, so that you can, I just sent it to Mark only. Got to send to everybody here. Sorry, Mark. Sand dams. It actually banks the water. So there are ways to store water. In terms of organizations, while there are certainly environmental organizations advocating conservation, a lot of water management in the West is on the government level. Government's doing a lot of the work with that. Now, here's another little interesting tidbit, is that there was a time back in the mid 1800s, late 1800s, when John Wesley Powell, look him up if you don't know about him. His biography is amazing. He was the first to run the Grand Canyon on a raft with one arm. He lost an arm in the Civil War. But he later proposed that the West, when it became states, should be politically divided based upon drainage, upon water catchments, river catchments, so that the same one state would manage water from a particular river. Talk about really intelligent. One of the big problems in the West is that the water is divided among all these states. And the Colorado River Compact back in the 1930s divided the Colorado River into water in the upper part of the compact and the lower part. And the upper part is Colorado and that part of the country. The lower part includes California. There's two wheels, a lot of control there. California, right? But water was allocated a certain amount to each state, and that was allocated way back when. And we're still more or less working with the allocation from that time. It's been adjusted a little bit, but we're still using an outdated, archaic system of allocating water because everybody wants their share, right? Okay, rainwater, Rebecca says, undrinkable due to forever chemicals. Yes, now it can be treated. You can even filter it and get the PFAS out of it. PFAS is the substance. These were flame retardants and things like that. You can filter it. There are filter pitchers that you can even use. You want to make sure you get one that says it'll do that. But you can filter the water and drink it. It can be filtered by a water plant for drinking. So we can certainly collect the rainwater even for our home and drink it. We just need to filter it first. We can't drink it straight. So you can also use it for manufacturing. We can also use gray water, which is water from our sinks and our showers and our dishwashers and our washing machines. That can be used to irrigate our lawns, right? So there's another way to kind of get the maximum use out of water. And in Tucson, gray water is used to irrigate golf courses. What a great use for that water. So anyway, I'm gonna scroll down here some more. Yeah, so anyway, interesting things we've talked about and thought about. We're gonna watch another video now. A couple of caveats about the video we're gonna watch. It looks really great. It's 30 minutes. So I've arbitrarily found a spot where it looks like it may be a stop because it's the guy, the news reporter who's talking about the thing, talking. So it looks like it might be a break in concept. I have no idea what's going to happen at 12 minutes, 45 seconds, but it looks fantastic. It's about a year old, so it's a little older, but it looks like a wonderful look at the problem. And it's going to be talking a lot more about forest fire, which is another big problem we have in the West associated with the drought that we haven't even touched upon yet. So we'll see where this takes us. And we're going to have about 10 minutes after that to talk a little bit more. So we'll come back then. So Mark has the link. I'm going to go ahead and type the link into chat. And we'll go ahead if you want to come back. We only have a few minutes. We only have a few minutes left. I did want to point out the latest statistics. The Colorado River Basin reservoirs are currently at 34% of capacity. And the Colorado River, I think this was mentioned, provides water and electricity for over 40 million people. And what's really, really scary is as things are going down in the reservoirs in Lake Mead and Lake Powell, they're going to reach a point very, very soon where those lakes can no longer produce hydropower. And that means that electricity that right now is powering the lights of Las Vegas is going to have to come from something else. And guess what it's probably going to come from? Anyone want to guess? I'm going to guess burning coal, if I was going to guess. And if not, maybe burning natural gas. So we're going to see an increase in the amount of greenhouse gases, dramatic increase when that happens, when hydropower stops. And it's going to be a shocker to the Southwest. I honestly haven't seen much yet about the extent to which power companies are prepared for that in the West. I'm not sure that they are. You know, it's like, and we're talking about being down to a year. You know, what kind of brinksmanship do we need before we'll take action? I don't know if you followed the news just a couple of years ago where South Africa, Cape Town, South Africa, was literally facing running out of water. They actually had a day when the whole city of Cape Town was going to run out of water. And they got within like a couple weeks of it because of drought. And they were looking at having to truck in water for the entire city. You know? How is it that humans aren't very capable of figuring out when to act? A lot of you posted about this. I'm kind of summarizing a lot of wonderful things you guys shared. And you shared some scary things about climate change deniers. And boy, I'm right with you on that. But it's really crazy, willfully ignorant, Rebecca says. Is it just me or is this really crazy? Anybody want to dive in and take the mic? We've got about a couple minutes left. Anyone want to share some thoughts by mic too about what they've seen today?
This is Stephanie. Living in Arizona, I feel like because I've been so exposed to it, it's almost as if I'm immune to it. I realize it's such a big problem, and I realize that we're in a serious mega drought, but I feel like I see it so often that all they do is raise awareness, bring awareness with no real solutions. And I'm guilty of, contributing to it as well. But I feel like I'm almost at the point where I'm immune to it, which is sad to say.
Patrick says, I'd love to hear more about how water might get from the East Coast to the West. Boy, that would be a huge amount of energy required, and a massive pipeline. And boy, we're still piping oil. Talk about being backwards. We're piping sludge. Keystone Pipeline that was in the news for a while was about basically taking this sludgy glop from the prairie provinces of Canada, pillaging the landscape up there, by the way, and taking the sludgy, yucky glop, hyper treating it, and then pumping it across the United States in a pipeline. We're still piping stuff that's causing the problem. Wow. If there's an increase in users and another source of power is needed, yeah, boy. But I don't know where all that power is going to come from. The percentage of power coming from wind and solar in most of the country is minute. So here's your big question. And I assure you that if you're kind of wondering what career to follow, if you pursue a career having to do with water and water engineering, anything having to do with water availability, you're going to be in demand. I promise you, you're going to be in demand. Issues around water supply and energy, these are huge, right? Absolutely huge. Well, we need, if you are here if you're here for honors, which you probably all are, reminder that as we reach the end of our hour, a reminder that you need to log your hour. You want to log your hour in the Qualtrics forum that I forgot to copy the link to. I don't know if you have it, Mark, or can get it. The Qualtrics link that's in the honors learning community. And thank you. And be sure to record it on your spreadsheet as well. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to stick around and answer them. I want to honor everyone's time commitments, though. So if anyone wants to talk further about this, please feel free to reach out to me as well with your questions. Again, this is something I'm scared to say I know quite a bit about, enough to keep me awake some nights. But feel free to reach out to me with your questions about this issue. And if you have any solutions, like I said, there's a lot of money out there to be made in these solutions, because boy, do we need them. Thank you all so much for coming. Appreciate it very much. And congratulations on surviving your test honors chat, Patrick. Awesome. Hope you come to more. Hope to see all of you at more of these events. And really appreciate it, everyone. Thank you so much for your time tonight and your thoughts. Really enjoyed talking with you. You are very welcome, everyone. Have a great evening.